This video is dedicated to all those people out there that still believe when Stephen Harper mentions we need some semblance of world governance that he was just talking smack. A group I came across the other day labels themselves as the Forum for a New World Governance, the FNWG, and what they have set out to do is create a world governance index, a tool in which the globalists can use to measure their effectiveness in certain policy, law, and other areas that they seem to be focusing on right now. To accomplish this, let's take a look at their website here, and we'll enter in through the English version, Forum for a New World Governance. Arriving at their main page, they highlight an article titled Moving Toward a New World Governance, where it goes on to say we are incontestably in a period in which we have broken away from a now vanished former order, insofar as order can apply to the Cold War, a period in which the world is seeking a new architecture of the world governance. Seeking, in short, a governance yet to be found will be capable of apprehending the moment's problems, anticipating tomorrow's crisis, and writing day after tomorrow's history. In other words, seeking a governance system adapted to henceforth globalized world, a world governance that will allow collective problems to be managed collectively and will take into account the interdependence that today defines relations among all people. The development of a world governance articulated around the principle of interdependence translates in its implementation as a systematic approach necessarily based on consensus work. The ethical and political base of such a governance are to be sought in a feeling of responsibility and solidarity of a global order. All of this in spirit of plurality, dignity, and sustainability. What could be designated as the 5 pillars of a global governance for the 21st century. So what they are doing here, as they mentioned, is developing 5 pillars of a global governance system. And we can take a look at what the 5 pillars are, because they go right into detail and let us know what they are. But before we get into that, let's take a look at who the FNWG are. On their main page, they have a section titled, Who Are We? If we take a look down the list, why have we opened this forum for a new world governance? The 3 causes of the crisis, a multilateral system, principles of governance, a guide to developing proposals for world governance. And they list their actions for 2008, 2009, so you can get a bit of history there. And the FNWG in brief, which is a PDF document. It's pretty interesting to take a look at. We're going to go into Principles of Governance, a guide to developing proposals for world governance. So these are their suggestions and principles that they seek to establish. Principles of Governance. Drawing on the many initiatives already launched in the different continents at various levels of governance and in many areas of public action, we have identified 5 principles on which to build governance. These principles are simple in appearance, but we should not underestimate the difficulties involved in implementing them. The distance between concept and reality is often wider than we think. Establishing suitable governance structures that are adapted to 21st century conditions requires a revolution in our existing concepts, mentalities, institutions, methods. A revolution that will only happen if we can mobilize determination, a firm will, and a clear vision of the objectives to be met, of the paths to be taken over the long term. So this is why they have developed their World Governance Index to help along this agenda to make sure that they're hitting their targets. They too seem to want a revolution. However, their revolution is the exact opposite of what many patriots out there are referring to. A while ago back, I covered this group in an article that I titled Harper, We Need Some Semblance of Global Governance. This is when Harper was trying to convince Canadians that we indeed needed global governance in Canada. Down at the bottom of the article, there's a listing, a link back to this document that they titled World Government Index. And it's a PDF document. It's 81 pages. We're going to go ahead and take a look at that document now. The document, World Governance Index, WGI. Why should world governance be evaluated and for what purpose? The document goes on to justify why global governance is a good thing and why mathematically it should be tracked and evaluated and assessed. And I mentioned earlier in the video that this is one of their tools that they're going to use to justify or to take us to the next level of global governance or one world government. A search feature over in the PDF section here that will allow you to search for keywords. I've mentioned it before in other videos I've done. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in New World Order. So already we have a match to that keyword, New World Order, and we can just dig in and see what it has to say. I'll just wind her back a bit here so we can get an idea of the context in which they're referring to this. Here we see them stating, facing the challenges of sustainable development, neither national sovereignties nor free market globalization seems to be up to the task of providing satisfactory solutions. This is why global governance is at the core of progress towards sustainable development. Globalization of the markets, the poor representation of stakeholders in the local, national, multilateral, and international regulation bodies, and global regulations hindered in their effectiveness by the absence of international sanctions all constitute the main obstacles to the performance of public decision centers in the age of regulation. This is what Paul Martin went on to talk about in his latest speech about how we need a regulator to regulate the regulators, to give this international or globalized body some teeth.
Furthermore, we must accept that putting global principles and standards in place is but the first step. These are going to have to be continuously reviewed by an international body whose only goal is the protection against systemic risk. And finally, those new standards are going to have to be mandatory, and they are going to have to be fully enforced. And this is where the rubber hits the road.
In order to establish this world governance that they keep referring to. Down here, world governance is in a sustainable development perspective is more demanding than the concept of good governance. So in Canada we have the POG, peace, order, and good governance. They seek to to replace that with world governance and placing it above our concept of good governance. Put at the front of the stage by certain financial institutions such as the World Bank. It requires working on promoting an ethics of behavior. It implies that all international institutions, financial ones in particular, factor in the stakes involved in sustainable development, hence the social and environmental dimensions being integrated into the practices of international, regional, and national finance bank backers. It opposes a change in the way public decisions are made and public action is implemented by including the voice of civil society and partnering with it. When they talk about civil society, they're talking about special interest groups who want to step up and speak on behalf of everyone. We'll get down to where the keyword New World Order pops up. World governance actors. So they're going to list here the important actors in this world governance system. From international organizations to non-governmental organizations, from states to private regulation bodies, there is a big diversity of actors participating in the development of norms, rules, and codes intended to control a domain of activity at the international scale. At the end of World War II, a new world order appeared based on a new international system constituted of a network of IGOs, civil society representatives, a set of economic and international finance players, and finally, states and informal groups. The IGOs, this type of organization comprises three distinct categories. Organizations with a universal vocation, the United Nations with, and we have the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Secretariat, the International Court of Justice, the ECOSOC, its operational agencies, as you can see they list them all, its specialized institutions, WHO, FAO, UNESCO, which is one group that's been really on my mind lately that I would like to do some further research into, since I see them putting the rubber stamp on all of our land. And international institutions, which constitute what is commonly known as the Bretton Woods Institution, the IMF, the BIS, the World Bank, set up in 1944. So they go on to list all the key players in this agenda to set up a world government. They don't hide anything in this document. They're not afraid to list who these people are because they want to create an index to see how effective they are in setting up the system. They go on to list the other two as being civil society representatives, embodied by the many NGOs, alter globalization movements, and they list the main ones: the landless movement, ATTAC, as being the main movements in that area, economic and international finance actors, states and informal groups. And one thing they identify that all these actors can agree upon is they need a diagnosis, basically a roadmap as to where they're going with all of this. So that's why this group has developed the World Governance Index, so that they can chart that out. So to create their World Governance Index, they take into account many different factors. Here I'm showing on the screen how they calculate the data for sustainable development, and they show the formula on what they use. And if we quickly go to page 76, we show how that data is compiled into their final World Governance Indicator or Index. And as we can see, Canada ranks 13. So you should check this group out for yourself, guys. Again, it's called Forum for a New World Governance. They are located at www.world-governance.org, and you can go through their site and see what they're up to. Just as a side note, I'd like to draw your attention to another group. They're titled the UNPA Campaign, and it's a campaign for a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. And what they want to do is create a world parliament. If you're going to have a world government, you're going to need a world parliament. So they're busy doing that. And another group that I covered in a previous video, the Hague Institute for the Internationalization of Law, the HILL, and these people are busy creating the law of the future, and it's a legal framework for one world government. Have a look at their website, lots of interesting stuff there as well. If you have any comments, questions, or any information that you'd like to contribute, please feel free to do so. Get a hold of me. Have a visit at nauresistance.org, pressfortruth.ca, and lots more information similar to this if this has piqued your interest. Thanks for watching.